Good? Can everyone hear me? Yes, great. Let's get started. Wow, we have a full house today. Thank you for coming to our session.
It's awesome.
Do you guys like the keynote today? Yeah, awesome stuff, awesome HTML stuff. Would you like to see more cool stuff? All right, you're at the right session, I promise. First, let me introduce myself and my co-presenter. My name is Mihai, and this is Arne.
Hi.
And we are developer advocates with the Google Chrome team. Today, we'll be talking about developing applications with HTML5 and about APIs available in Google Chrome and Google Chrome OS. As we saw from the keynote, HTML5 has been a major focus area over the past year at Google. And as you'll see again, the Google Chrome team has been very busy implementing some great HTML5 features. Quick note about the Google Wave site for this session. You can view live notes and submit questions at this URL. It's also displayed at the bottom left corner of every slide, so don't worry if you didn't write it down. This presentation is about HTML5. And the best way to talk about HTML5 is to show it in action. As you guys probably figured out, we have built this entire presentation as an HTML5 application. And because we're geeks and to keep up with good programming practices, we even provided you with some software metrics. We use that many HTML elements and JavaScript lines of code and CSS properties to build this presentation. Let's have a quick look at the agenda for the talk. First, a brief history of web development. Next, we'll look at some of the things we have been doing in Google Chrome around HTML5. We'll continue with an HTML5 primer and show you how we use HTML5 APIs in real case scenarios. We have some surprise guests and some really cool demos, so stay tuned. And we'll end with key takeaways, links to developer resources, and a Q&A session.
So get your questions in moderator now.
Right, if you have questions, shoot away. So let's go back in time and look at some major milestones in web development. It all started in 1990. The first web page was created, and HTML1 was born. By 1994, the first web browser and HTML2 appeared on the scene. The web revolution has started. In 1995, the revolution continued. Netscape took it to the next level with the introduction of JavaScript. And CSS1 shortly followed in 1996. Now you could write web code on the web. So we started seeing the first web application. 1997 and 1998 brought us HTML4 and CSS2, more features, more standardization, better browsers, better user experience. Still, there were some serious bottlenecks in advancing web development on the web, and that was the latency of synchronous requests. The problem was addressed partially in 1999 with the introduction of XML HTTP by Microsoft, and in 2002 when Mozilla added XML HTTP requests natively to the browser. That set up the stage for AJAX applications to take off. And by 2005, we started seeing real client-server web applications. Think of Gmail and Google Maps. And finally, in 2009, the web was ready for more. The time was right to add more capabilities to the web browser. And HTML5 was introduced. So what is HTML5? Well, we all know it's a W3C standard proposal, but we like to think of it as a generic name for the open web, a collection of open web standards. Standards such as you can see, you guys like this animation? Let's see it again. So we did this with the Box 2D graphics engine, all JavaScript. So we color-coded some of these standards. I know, HTML5 is really heavy. Heavy stuff. And we randomize it so every time it's different. Much better. So, thank you. So we color-coded them. Red for HTML, green for JavaScript, and yellow for CSS. HTML, JavaScript, CSS. They're all part of what we refer to as HTML5. Let's have a quick look at Google Chrome. The Chrome browser is the playground where we prototype and implement HTML5 features. We launched Google Chrome less than 2 years ago with the goal to create a browser for the modern web. A browser that can provide a better user experience, better development tools, and allow for rich web applications. We have a few stats here that I want to share with you that confirm we're on the right track. First, we have over 70 million users and growing. We are iterating and improving very fast with 28 stable releases to date. We are improving the performance, the end-to-end performance on the browser. The JavaScript engine performance, for example, has improved over 300% since launch. And finally, we are focusing on HTML5 as the underlying code of the web that makes rich applications possible. The keynote emphasized that HTML5 is the future of the web. And I'll reemphasize that with every HTML5 API that we launch, we make the web much more powerful. And that gets us one step closer to bridging the gap between web applications and desktop applications. So let's take a look at a few APIs and a few areas where we made great progress. First, Canvas, WebGL, CSS3 for rich graphics and games. Audio and video tag for built-in high-quality access to multimedia. Worker threads for native multi-threading support and multi-core CPUs. Notification and non-intrusive alerts for a better user experience. WebSockets for built-in full duplex real-time messaging protocols. And finally, application cache and local storage for offline access and local databases. So all of these are really powerful APIs. And next, we'll have a closer look at their capabilities. Arne will take over and show us how we use them in real case scenarios.
Thank you, Mihai. Just do a quick switch over here. So when I found out that I would be able to give a talk to so many people, this is actually really awesome that we have so many people here. I need to notify my boss that my speaking fee is now double. This is great. Maybe I can be close to Bristol Palin. Maybe, no, small. Anyway, we knew that with HTML5, we could tell you about all the great new APIs that we really like developers to use. Or we could show you, and showing you all of these APIs working together in a single application is really awesome. So myself and Mihai and a couple other folks at Google spent the last week kind of throwing together last month, throwing together HTML5 painting application. We figured a paint app would be a really great way to show you kind of a lot of APIs stuff together. And so this is kind of like the world premiere of an app that we're calling Chromabrush. And yeah, the first time I've revealed it to the public. You can actually test it out now if you go to chromabrush.com. I'll just give you the caveat that we were building it very quickly, so we didn't have much time to tune it for every browser. For the most part, we display a warning if you don't run dev channel Google Chrome. But please play with it. Yes, yes, more about that later. But anyway, I'll just demo you a quick little bit of functionality. So I'm going to see if I can actually, kind of replicate the famous Macintosh, there we go, drawing on the canvas here. So I'll go into individual features and how we built out different parts of this app. Just wanted to give you a quick heads up of we have this app and this is going to be a thing we're going back to. Naturally, when we were designing Chromabrush, we kind of broke things down into a few areas we wanted to really focus on, especially in the context of this presentation. And the first thing you would think of when you're writing a HTML5 paint application is obviously the canvas element. As I'm sure any of you who have any even passing familiarity with HTML5 would know, this is the new element that kind of lets you draw on the browser itself. So the API itself, let me just reload. That's better. The API itself is very simple. You can see here I'm doing a couple lines of setup. There's a few different methods for doing things like drawing shapes, primitives like lines and circles. And you can even get into the pixels of an image and get the color value and set it that way. But I don't really like showing code like this as much as I do like just having demos that I can click on. So you can see here as I'm kind of working with this, I'm just drawing random lines on this canvas here. You get an idea, I can draw lines, I can draw circles, and then I can also get into the pixels of the image and flip the colors. So what I'm actually doing here is inverting each color as I see it in the image itself. So I can draw a little bit more and invert, and you can see I have pixel level control over the image itself. You can do other things. You can draw images directly onto a canvas from a source like an image tag or a video tag, which we'll get to later. So the cool thing about Canvas is that even though it's in JavaScript, you can actually draw and redraw an image so many times that it looks very smooth if you animate it, if you change it slightly each frame. So what I do here is I'm just redrawing this image a bunch of times. Very straightforward. I'm just doing a little spinning animation. And I'm not actually doing the rotation. I basically just tell the canvas to rotate the image and draw it again. There's a very cool additional part of Canvas, which is the idea that, well, you can get a 2D context to draw shapes and images and things like that. You can also get a 3D context, which actually lets you do 3D graphics in the browser using an API called WebGL. If you're familiar with OpenGL, especially the variant called OpenGL ES, which is more for like mobile applications, you can actually realize that the API is very similar here, and it gives you all sorts of advanced features like writing shaders to render your 3D graphics. You get things like lighting, and et cetera. There's actually a GWT talk, I think, where they'll be covering porting Quake 2 to WebGL, and we think that's a really amazing way to show you how sophisticated WebGL can be. My skills are basically limited to making a box spin, but other people are much better than I am. I can make good slides, though. So I'll just demo again on Chromabrush. Like I said, we have primitives in the canvas. So obviously, I'm using this drawing area here as a drawing surface, and I'll just change my color a little bit here and my line size. And you can see I'm kind of just drawing lines and shapes. And we also had to implement some drawing algorithms, which were fun to look up, and to do things like flood fill. So let me change my color one more time. You can see that I actually went in, analyzed the pixels on my canvas, and then I implemented a fill algorithm that would fill continuous regions of space with a certain color. So Canvas kind of lets us all do that. We can also see, as I've been choosing colors here, this color picker is all rendered in Canvas. So it kind of gives you a sense of how dynamic the interface can be and how non-standard, right? You're not limited to just DOM elements in the page, even though the canvas itself is a DOM element. So another part that we really wanted to emphasize was multimedia. There's some good APIs for this. Basically, audio and video. Very straightforward, just like Canvas, they're new tags in the page. You can see here I'm dropping a sound clip into my page, and then I'm setting the muted value to false in this script here. On video, again, it's just a simple tag. You might notice that I'm pointing to a WebM movie, which is the new VP8 codec. Very cool stuff that we announced today. Yes, yes. But again, I like to show you a little bit more. And the thing I really get excited about when I'm talking about video in the web and not using a plugin or anything is that you really, like, it is a DOM element in the page. So you get access to not only style it with CSS, but you can actually go in and look at the pixel data that's coming in the video stream. So I'll just play a little Chrome promotional video that we have here. Hopefully this won't be too loud. Okay, cool. So you can see I'm just playing a video directly in the page. It's unstyled right now, but the controls are these JavaScript buttons that I've wired up. Now, I have my fancy button here, and what that does is just apply CSS styles to the video. So you can see that I've put a border on it, I've put a drop shadow on my video, and I've put a WebKit reflection property on my video. And this is all CSS. I didn't do anything crazy. I didn't have to go and draw anything. I basically put CSS styles on it like I would any other element in the page. I ran out of time, so I'm just going to play it again. But I'm going to make it really fancy now. And I'm going to show you what you can do when you actually have the power of Canvas and a video tag itself. So what I'm doing is I'm actually slicing up the video into 10 different strips. And then I'm drawing each strip individually onto a canvas at a different location over time. So I'm actually animating the dimensions of the video while drawing the video at full frame rate directly into the web browser, which is all handled natively by Chrome's amazing rendering engine. This is really cool. I'm looking forward to stuff that people come up with this. There's already demos like exploding videos and stuff, which are amazing. So good artists steal, I guess. Anyway, demo some multimedia. So obviously, we wanted a application type of interface. So I put in a few sound effects when I was bored one day at work. So hopefully, we'll get some. There you go. So you can hear some sound effects. Sorry, the delay is a little bit bad. And I did things like, yeah, that's me, when I rearranged layers. So it kind of gives a nice tactile interface to the application. I also decided that the best way to show people how to use the app would be to film a video, kind of just show me clicking around. So again, you get the idea that these online web apps don't have to be static, boring text pages. I mean, this is a multimedia experience. Has me doing a much better hi than I did before, that kind of thing. So Chromabrush itself is a very, it's an image processing program. There's some algorithms that we had to implement that, first of all, I'm not good at optimization, so I had some pretty heavy-duty CPU type stuff, which I'm sure other people could optimize. But generally speaking, we have to work with a lot of data. So we both want to store it locally, so we don't have to transfer it back up to the server to do anything interesting. And we also want to be able to process it kind of in a way that's not obtrusive to the end user. So you can see here that I haven't really practiced very much with this browser, but what I'm doing is I'm actually reloading, like I'm counting the number of times that this presentation's been loaded in this browser. And I'm doing that so that I can actually show you a new API called local storage, which lets you save data into the browser per website. And basically, that's persistent data that no matter if you close the browser, if you reload the page, that data is always there. It's kind of like a cookie, but it doesn't get sent back to the server. So it lets client-side applications really have data stored locally that they can use for settings and things like that. So you can see as I refresh this application here, sorry, running up against some network issues today. OK, 4 times. You'll notice that the fonts are changing because one of the fonts isn't cached very well. So I'll just wait until it pops up again. Oh, no. So, whoa. Yeah, that's not good. OK, so that's how we store some simple settings and things. And then there's a few other storage options that let you do things like use SQL databases. Basically, you can store structured, complex data in the client side, and you can query it. And we have a pretty awesome third-party demo that will demonstrate this. This is going to be really cool. There are also a few new APIs that we really didn't have material for, but IndexedDB is a standard, basically kind of like a SQL database, but lets you store data under an index system. There's also an upcoming file API, which will give each website its own virtual kind of file system that you kind of interact with files in a file system manner. And app cache, which is really cool if you want to build an offline API, offline application. Basically, you define which files the browser should download in cache indefinitely. And then your application will basically reference those files if there's no internet connection. So for example, if I had put an app cache into Chromabrush and you were able to disconnect from the internet, then all of the client-side files would be there locally and available for use. Since there's very little network traffic on Chromabrush, it downloads all the assets and then does most of the work client-side. That would mean it would be almost fully functional. So I talked about processing data, and this is kind of the feature I'm most in love with right now. It's basically a way for JavaScript to not block the UI when you're doing complex tasks. If you've ever had a slow-running JavaScript web page, you might notice that after about 20 seconds or so, the browser kind of tells you, hey, there's a script running too much. Everything's locked down. Nothing's really rendering or updating. And that's usually because there's like an infinite loop or some sort of bug in the JavaScript code. But it can happen also if you're doing things like some image algorithms, which are now possible with Canvas. So what I have implemented here is a drawing sample, where you can see that every time I'm moving the mouse, I'm actually getting a mouse event where I'm drawing on the left, and then on the right, I'm calculating the difference between the last time I called this API. And basically, the line isn't continuous because the diff algorithm is actually slow enough that it blocks the event from firing very often. So I don't get a solid line. Whereas now I can offload this processing into what we call a web worker, and you can see that the web worker line is actually solid. I'm kind of just drawing around here. And if you have an eye for these things, on the right-hand side, the update's actually a lot faster too. So we use this as a means of keeping the UI responsive while doing some data-intensive tasks. One of the ways I wanted to demo this was actually just to show you simplified blur. Talk about this while it's calculating the background. The blur filter in JavaScript, my naive, not optimized version, which runs several passes to get a big blur, will actually, I'm sorry, I blurred the wrong layer. We have layer support, by the way. So my naive algorithm actually allows the UI to update itself while it's running in the background. If I hadn't put this into a worker thread, then the UI would be unresponsive. I wouldn't even be able to render a progress bar. You can see here that the image is slightly blurrier than when we began. Another very cool feature of worker threads is that it kind of lets us do stuff that we wouldn't be able to normally without putting a lot of asynchronous kind of timeouts and stuff into our application. So what I did at the beginning of Chromabrush, when it was first loaded, I started up a worker thread that sits in the background, and it kind of runs that diff algorithm against any change to the canvas. And what this lets me do is keep a persistent state in memory of what the canvas looked like over history, kind of what the changes were. So for example, we implemented a undo feature, which I didn't click that correctly, which actually lets me undo the blur that I just did. In fact, I can step back into history a little bit more. Now, I'm currently storing this directly in RAM, but a great application of this would be to write it to a SQL database or something so that I could have a persistent history over the course of the user using the application, even across sessions. Another kind of these focus areas that we're talking about is the ability to make a web application really kind of behave like a desktop application. We call this the desktop experience. And there's a couple loosely related features here that I want to talk about. First is drag and drop. So drag and drop isn't new to the browser. I mean, if you're a jQuery user, you've probably had a website somewhere that implements it with one line of code. It's very, very straightforward that way, but the trouble is that the drag and drop events weren't really native events in the browser. So there was no way that the browser could tell you that there's something special going on. Well, in HTML5, drag and drop now, kind of very straightforward, can let you do drag and drop events directly in the browser as first-class citizens. The great part about this is that the events can tell you if there's some sort of special situation going on. For example, if you select text and drag it into another area of the page, or if you do something really cool like dragging files onto the browser itself. But I'll show you that later. There's also something new that's kind of exclusive to Chrome right now. but is coming into the HTML5 spec, and we're hoping other browsers adopt it pretty soon. It's called notifications, and it's a way of a web application kind of telling the user that there's something interesting going on with the app without stealing focus or being really too intrusive on the user's desktop experience. So something like this would be considered if you had Gmail, kind of want to tell you that there's a new message or calendar to tell you that you have an appointment. I'll show you what that kind of looks like right now. So I'm just going to request permission. And now I'll show a notification. You can see that after this presentation's over, I'm planning on being at the Thirsty Bear if you want to chat about HTML5 over a pint, because that would be delicious. I'm just showing you that the browser's minimized and the notification is persistent. If I were on a different tab, then that would also still pop up. So it's just a nice way for the current application to give you information about this. So desktop experience in Chromabrush. Well, I thought the coolest thing would be if I could drag a file from my desktop directly onto the application. So you can see here that I actually have me again. I actually use this to import images. So now I have images that are part of the canvas because I'm dragging and dropping them. And I can do things like fill them. You know, it's part of the canvas now. So I can actually do stuff like that. That's my drag and drop. Also, we have kind of layer support. And I've also implemented the ability to show a notification. So for example, remember that slow filter that I was running before? And now I can get a notification if the filter is done. So I'm going to hand things off to Mihai for a little bit, and he's going to talk about how you can use new properties in CSS to make things look really cool.
Thank you, Arne. Yes, awesome demo. So CSS is another area of really exciting developments for HTML5 applications. With the CSS3 spec, we now have access to some amazingly powerful capabilities. And I want to go with you through a few of them. First, everyone likes nice visuals and nice visual effects. And on this slide, we'll do just that. We built a nice application. You all liked it. Now we're going to build a nice logo for it. We want to look good. We need a nice font. We need some nice color. We need some nice shadow. Let's do it. We're going to do it with HTML5. No Photoshop, no fancy graphics package, HTML5, baby. At the top, we have 5 fonts to choose from. This morning, Google announced that we now have a web font API and the web font directory. We just picked 5 fonts from there. So you can see here, I can select the font I want. You know, all kinds of stuff here. OK, let's settle on this one. I can play with the color. I can play with the background color. I can add some reflection. I can add some shadow, some nice-looking shadowy font. And of course, every sleek and cool-looking logo has to have rounded corners, right? Rounded corners has been called the holy grail of CSS. And before CSS3, you had to go through countless hacks to achieve this effect. Now, we'll do it with one line of code. There we go. So here we go. You know, our nice, thank you. Our nice Chromabrush logo in 30 seconds or less. One thing I want to mention, you may have noticed that some of the CSS properties have a -WebKit prefix. In Firefox, you may see the -moz prefix. Those are experimental APIs, people still figuring out the right way to do it. When they're finalized and added to the spec, the prefix will be dropped. And you know, some of the others, they did have a prefix before being dropped. How about more cool stuff? How about 2D transforms? With CSS3, 2D transforms are native to the browser. And on this slide, we show you 3 examples: rotate, scale, and skew. But let's see rotate in action. So I'm going to hover over this box and It will rotate nicely, and we also have a bonus, nice smooth transition. 2 lines of code, very powerful API. How about animations? Do you guys remember the notorious HTML blink tag? Yeah, okay. Yeah, it was considered the most obnoxious HTML tag ever, and some people even call it simply evil. So can we do better with CSS3? Yeah. Okay, you see the code up there. And ladies and gentlemen, I introduce to you CSS Pulse. Now, I hope I didn't open Pandora's box, so please don't overuse this effect. Too late. I mentioned earlier the new fonts available from Google and the Web Font API. So before that, it was really difficult to do one thing on the web since the early days on the web. And that was beautiful typography, nice typography on the web. You had to do image, you had to play with Flash, really headache. Not anymore. On this page, we have an example where we used, I think, 7 fonts from the Google font directory. And if you get our humor, we wrote you a slightly threatening note not to abuse the pulse animation. And we did it like in the ransom notes with newspaper clippings. So that's what you can do with the add font face. And finally, I want to mention the flexible box model, another really powerful addition to the CSS3 spec. With the flexible box model, you can do elastic and fluid layouts that adapt to the font size or the browser window size, things you weren't able to do before. So let me show you a very simple demo here. Very nicely, whenever the size changes, your layout will nicely flow around it. So this is exactly what was needed to provide a simple and easy solution to common web design problems. Form layout and vertical centering, just 2 of them. How did we put all these goodies to good use? Arne will show us.
So with Chromabrush, we definitely used CSS a lot, but we really wanted it to be kind of fairly subtle, even though Mihai really tried to get me to put a blink tag in there, or a pulse tag. I held out. So basically, it's very lightweight. We have a few rounded corners here. On the UI elements, we have some drop shadows on the toolbars, that kind of thing. We rendered the logo, again, using the new font support in HTML5, did a few effects on that, but mostly understated stuff. We really wanted it to be kind of like an elegant desktop application. But what I really think is like the coolest part of the CSS3, kind of the new features that we had available, was the ability to use box model, the flexible box model spec. So you can see here as I'm resizing the browser window, the things that are meant to resize are resizing, and the things that are not are constant. And normally, I've written websites which calculate the height of the window, they listen to events, there's usually some lag behind that kind of thing. Well, all of the layout is done entirely through CSS. There's no JavaScript doing the ratios or proportions of this layout. So the great thing about this is that the browser's own rendering engine decides what goes where. We just kind of tell it how we want things to look, which is kind of the point of CSS in the first place. So you can see that even the toolbar on the bottom, if I make it too narrow, will automatically reflow to fit all the icons that we have in there. And the only reason it does that is because those icons are inline elements like they're supposed to be. So basically, the browser does it all for us. We don't have to do any complex calculations. We still get all the advantage of HTML and get to do some pretty cool stuff with CSS. So I'll just bring it back to the presentation.
Thank you, Arne. That was awesome. So with this, our Chromabrush demo ends, but not its development. Chromabrush is open source. You can find it on the web at chromabrush.com or the open source project at chromabrush.googlecode.com. We plan to work on it more and add some more HTML goodies. And on this slide, we have a few examples. We also invite the developer community to contribute. Have a look at it and let us know what you think. One thing that it's very easy to do is to add an offline experience for the user through application cache. With WebSockets, we can add a multi-user experience. Imagine a whiteboard application where remote users from different parts of the world collaborate on the same drawing. With geolocation, we can go a step further and add location information for each one of those users or drawings. And of course, there's a lot more. So that's why we need your help. Please go ahead, check out the project, and send us your feedback, contribute to it. With that said, we are so excited about what's coming up that we allowed ourselves to use the CSS pulse, or the pulse animation. So we get one free pass. And with that, please welcome Chris Fenner and Mike Park from Template. Thank you.
Thanks, man. Okay, so we're going to take some of those things seen this morning. We're going to apply them to music, and I want to show you here with Mike's help 6 things that we're going to do that I hope to show what the attribute is, an actual implementation of it. We want to see it in action, and then to the extent we can be clear about the benefits, we'll do that. This is an adaptation of Thumbplay Music, a music service available for $10 a month across a lot of platforms, including soon those that support HTML5. And we've licensed over 8 million songs and have had APIs across a lot of platforms available for some time. And the first thing we'd like to show you, because it is music, is the audio tag. Mike? Take my badge, but my heart remains. Native HTML5 audio. And we use that both in the overlays within the feature and then as the bottom embedded player, and we'll show you some of the effects in that in a second. Now, as you sort the songs in this app by those that are, in this case, most popular, we've pulled the most popular API. Mike's now pivoting using the web database API. There's a SQLite database running in here with all the attributes related to each track. You'll see in a second. So the metadata related to this music, including time. You'll see then a preview path to the 30-second stream, an image path where there's imagery associated with it. No trips to the server are happening here. And as you saw from some of the pivots Mike was doing, it happens really fast. Now, we're next going to go into one of the album releases. LCD Sound System just yesterday put out This Is Happening. And when the list of songs in the Songs tab comes up, you're going to see Mike select the second one from the album because he's all psyched to hear it, but he doesn't have time right now, so he's going to drag it over to the playlist menu on the left using, you guessed it, drag and drop. Now, full disclosure, we did do this in jQuery because we're waiting for the native attribute in HTML5 to bake a little bit, but we're ready to do that. And then I think you saw a notification when the drag and drop completed itself. That is using the native notifications API. Mike's popped up a couple times. The album cover art, that's a CSS effect. And then in CSS, since we're talking about it, Mike can mouse over some of the embedded player things that change state and effects. Also up in search, if Mike wants to dive deeper in that album and look for something, we're going to autofill what the likely results are. And then as Mike tries to figure out which one he actually wants to do, you also see some CSS effects there. So we found that it puts the presentation layer where it belongs and away from the code that handles real logic, if you will. So I think that's everything. That's Thumbplay Music. Oh, and there's one more. I always forget. Mike has to go to a meeting in the middle of this demo, and he doesn't have time and doesn't want it to look like he was wasting time. So he's now closed, in this case, the tab of the browser. He's running to his meeting, so it didn't look like he was frittering around. And now he's come back, but was really psyched to get back to where he left off with this playlist. And you may guess it already, we are about to see local storage with the auto login. We'll see a second of the main page, but wait for it. And back where we were. So that's all 6 attributes Thanks for letting a non-developer walk you through them. And if you want to learn more, I'd say the note to send to is partners@thumbplay.com for more. But thank you very much for your time and attention.
Awesome. Awesome.
Thanks, guys.
During the keynote, you got a glimpse at the new HTML5 enabled TweetDeck. And now I would like to invite in Dodsworth, CEO and founder of TweetDeck, my favorite tweeting app, to show us more. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, so I'm Ian Dodsworth, the CEO and founder of TweetDeck. At its most simplest, TweetDeck is an application, sort of famously, if you like, on the desktop. We've got it on the iPad and also on the iPhone, and Android coming very soon. And it's designed to take quite a lot of social network information and make it a lot more manageable. That's at its most simplistic. At its kind of normal run rate, it's a huge desktop application that's very complicated and very powerful and very black. And obviously, I love it, and that's why I built it like that. So this is our HTML5 TweetDeck. And this is a little bit of a departure for us, because everything else has been a native app. We obviously get most of our usage through the desktop at the moment. So I think the main points on this, obviously we can see that we can scroll very smoothly up and down. We can go left and right. Let's add a new column in, just like this. It'll appear over there, so it's very quick. The actual system resources this takes is very low as well. This is really, at the moment, only using Twitter and Buzz. We don't actually have a Buzz integration in this bit at the moment, but we have Buzz integrated in this, and we'll be working on this over the next few weeks to put Facebook in and to put all the other social networks that are kind of required of a TweetDeck. So it won't be very long before we will get a fully featured HTML5 version of a TweetDeck, which, to be fair, we didn't even know was possible when we started. So this, as it stands at the moment, this is an internal piece of research, which obviously we're incredibly happy to show today, and we obviously are planning to put it out. But I think the point that's worth making here is that as a traditional desktop company, if you like, we really wanted to prove that you could actually do a TweetDeck in a web browser, and there was absolutely no way we were going to do a dumbed-down light version of TweetDeck at all. So it was either fully featured or it's never going to appear in a browser. So you can see that we're kind of getting there, and I think that's probably the right approach in this instance. So just some of the things you can see sort of on display. So obviously we have we do have audio alerts. Bring that back, which at the moment we're kind of not showing, but the other element of this is obviously with a full sort of audio implementation, we can also build in a media player into this so that we can play everything in line. You don't have to go off to another page in order to play audio. We have notifications, desktop notifications in here, and that's been one of the main reasons why we haven't actually built a web version as well, is obviously we want notifications, and you know, TweetDeck is not sort of at the front all the time. It's kind of sitting in the background churning away, so notifications are a huge part of the sort of functionality. Drag and drop of columns, which a little bit slow there. But drag and drop of columns, I mean, obviously the next thing we'll do after that is the dragging and dropping of actual users as well. So this is a very nice way of creating lists and sort of that kind of thing where you have to do user-specific or tweet-specific actions. We'll now be able to do the whole thing through drag and drop inside a browser. And of course, there's offline storage included. So that obviously if you just turn it off and you come back, it's exactly where it was. You won't lose your place in a column, especially if it's kind of quite a long column. And then kind of the final thing on this is we have a CSS3 sort of layer on top as well, so that we can get some fairly nice animations in here. So it's it's rather early days, but it hasn't taken a huge amount of time to get to this point either. It's kind of really only been about a month to get to this. And I think, to be fair, you're going to see, you will see a TweetDeck released in the browser soon. We've just got to prove that we can get it all in, but this is a fantastic start. So thanks very much.
Amazing, absolutely mind-blowing what you can do with HTML5. So it's time to wrap up. Before we do that, I want to go over some key takeaways from this talk. First, over the past year, we have seen a wave of new HTML5 technologies all gaining momentum, and we expect the trend to continue. Second, browser innovation is accelerating. We are seeing that not only with Google Chrome, but with other browsers as well. And it's really great to see faster JavaScript engines and more powerful and better developer tools. Third, as we have seen from our demos and examples, web applications are getting closer and closer to parity with desktop applications. We're close, we're getting there. And now with the Google App Store, Web Store launch, you can also monetize your web applications. And finally, we couldn't have done any of this without the involvement and support from the developer community. So please stay involved and help us move the web forward. Thank you. We're starting our Q&A session. There's also a link, as we promised, to developer resources. It's a page where we're going to keep adding more and more resources as they seem fit. And if you have a question that's not yet in the moderator, please use the microphones on both sides of the aisle.
So I guess we'll just start off with the moderator question. What 3 HTML5 features can I implement on my site quickly that will benefit my users most? Nice, nice. Well, what type of site do you have? Something I actually really liked about the keynote was Sports Illustrated talking about, beautiful fonts make readability a lot better. And so if you can use fonts, I honestly think that nice layouts, getting kind of creative, making the web more engaging for people is very interesting. In terms of a performance benefit, obviously switching to CSS, not using images as often, especially doing things like, if you're willing to sacrifice rounded corners for everyone so that you can stop serving a ton of rounded corner images, for example, I'd say switch to that right away because it'll save you bandwidth, rendering time will be improved, that kind of thing. You can also use new markup in HTML5 for accessibility, which is obviously extremely important for users who might not have the full, who might rely on that and have browsers that really need content to be marked up correctly and in a clean, kind of nice format. So I think those are pretty good features. I don't know if you have your own.
Let's go quickly to some more questions, and then we're going to be here. If we didn't answer your questions, come talk to us or outside. So when will we see an IDE for writing HTML5 applications? That pretty much makes things easier. During the keynote, we just saw a demonstration of Dreamweaver. I'm sure others are in the works, and with the momentum that I just mentioned behind HTML5 applications, IDE is just a matter of time before they appear. Let's take a question from the microphone.
From what we've seen today of notifications, it looks like a very powerful tool with a lot of uses. But what's being done to prevent it from being used by, say, invasive advertisers or malicious software?
So you've noticed, both in the slides and when Arne demonstrated our Paint applications, you have to give access to the notification API. When the slide first appeared, you didn't have an access. You specifically had to click on the allow access to this website to display notification. Once you do that, it means you trust the site, and if they annoy you, you can take out that right.
Additionally, notifications have the option to disable for the serving domain, at least in Chrome, and we're hoping that other browsers implement similar features so that the user is in control of it.
Excellent, thank you.
It's a good question, thanks.
All right, next question.
Can you say anything about solutions for specialized typography? For example, in the math community, we use LaTeX a lot, or for musicians, music notation and that sort of thing within the browser?
We're not specialists in that. There is a talk about the web fonts, I believe, later today.
I'm not sure about that. I have seen people do stuff interesting in Canvas. Like I saw an implementation in Canvas of the LaTeX layout engine. So if you know the CSS kind of layout, if you have full justification, isn't quite as nice as the LaTeX one.
Right.
And so someone actually wrote it in Canvas, so they're rendering the fonts in Canvas and doing it that way, which is interesting. I think, obviously, the spec could probably include additional text rendering modes, but the progress we've made so far is very good. And
Thank you.
Thanks.
So for those of you who don't know, there is an HTML5 group that we all in the Chrome team respond to questions. So if we don't answer anything here, go and post your question there, and it'll get an answer. And we have more people that know a lot more stuff than just the two of us can answer.
A really fast question. Are you going to post your HTML5 presentation somewhere online so we can all experience the coolness?
Yeah, so the question was, are we going to post it online? And obviously, yes, we will. So the presentation is being recorded and will be on YouTube shortly. And as soon as we just basically just push it out to an URL somewhere, we'll make sure that it's attached to all the I/O content. So you'll have access. I also kind of want to open source it, so so you can actually pick it apart and
You can
do stuff with
reuse it.
Yeah.
Spread the word. HTML5 is cool.
Let's take one more from the...
Oh, one more from the microphone.
For the notification model, there was obviously like a permission system where the app can request permissions from the user. Is that limited to domain, or does it persist? Is there any extra functionality there? Or is it simply every single time they load the app, they have to give permission again?
Yeah, that's a good question. The question, so does the notification permission persist? It does persist. It's per domain. You can think of it kind of like in the same model as, I guess, what would be a good way? Like kind of like an Ajax thing where, it's all kind of scoped to the same domain, or like a cookie thing. And, the user can revoke it at any time. The browser should have its own UI for that kind of thing as well. But for the most part, you'll have to say yes once, and as long as you don't want to disable it, it'll stay on. Now, an interesting part of the App Store, the Web Store, the Chrome Web Store, is that the Chrome web apps can actually declare that they want this permission up front. So when the user installs it, they'll preemptively agree to it, and then the app will be able to send notifications without that bar. And Chrome extensions can do that as well, which is pretty cool. I'm not sure if this is kind of like a meta question, or if it's just really a legitimate bug.
Someone is testing us.
Yeah. HTML. I'm not good at grokking the solve HTML4 issues, bring new concepts to web, extend mobile platforms. Just a regular update. Not really sure. Sorry.
We are geeks, but we can't read through.
Yeah. HTML versus apps. What are your thoughts? I don't think it needs to be versus. I mean.
Well, HTML5 apps are apps.
Yeah.
That's what we just showed you today, and our invited guests.
Yeah, and I use Photoshop, and I'll use Chromabrush when I want something lightweight, and hopefully, the line will blur even more as we go ahead. So, it's cool. Will HTML5 file API work on mobile? That's really up to mobile, I guess. If mobile implements it, which actually brings an interesting point that mobile browsers are actually the ones that are implementing a lot of these features the quickest. Mostly because, a lot of them are WebKit based, and WebKit adopts a lot of these features really quickly. And they're useful for mobile. Things like offline mode is really essential for mobile web to work. So I'm assuming that it will work on mobile at some point, but it's just not there yet.
Mobile drives the development of some HTML5 feature. For example, application cache is very useful on mobile phones. You want offline access to your apps when you don't have a good connection.
Why don't we take in person?
How did the Chromabrush, how was it able to save images to like a file from that canvas?
So the question is how does Chromabrush save images to a file from the canvas? Well, it doesn't right now, which is like the easiest answer. as soon as I get back to work, I'm assuming that I'll probably just bounce it off a server and have the user download it using the native browser kind of thing. I have to look into drag and drop out of the browser, which you could do as well. But the thing is that for that, you basically need to have the user drag an image, not a canvas. So Canvas has a nice API that you can get on like a raw data string that's a PNG file. So you can do things with that. You can store it online, upload it to a web service. You can have the user, prompt the user to save it somewhere. Eventually, we could do the file API. But again, that wouldn't be on the file system. It would be kind of in the app's own file space. So
that is an excellent question, and shows us that we still have this much to go to bridge the gap with desktop applications. And that's why all this stuff, all those questions, all these problems are really great to push forward the development of HTML5. And new APIs like file APIs and other things the community is working on will solve this.
Yeah. Also, I mean, consider it, how would you save a file from a browser, right? Like, a browser can save files, but has its own mechanism for that. It's not quite the same as a desktop. It's a good point. Yeah, I think.
Hello. So I worked at Real Networks about 10 years ago, and we were working on a language called Smile. I don't know if you're familiar with that, but it allows you to control when media was downloaded and utilized. Does HTML5 have anything like that, where you can actually control, load this video, preload this video, schedule something else coming in 10 seconds later? Because I'm assuming, with the modern browsers and bandwidth, it's not a problem, but on mobile phones, it probably will be an issue where you're going to need to have some access to that.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, there are techniques that you can use to preload. I mean, the HTML video tag has its own kind of DOM states, so you can detect whether something's loaded or not and ready to play. As far as I know, there's no, like, it's as simple as putting a video element in the page and the browser will get it, and when it's ready, you can say, do something. You can also use JavaScript to, script elements dynamically, insert them into the page. Is that what you were?
There's actually going to be some sort of event spawned when it's ready to play, or you'll be able to say, I've got this much available in the cache. You actually have access to that?
Yeah, that's in the video tag. So you can actually determine. I think you get an event for when you have enough to play, and the buffering would take you to the end, assuming that the rate stays the same. You also get an event when the full movie is buffered, and you can play it. So thank you.
Let's take one more question from the moderator. Is the Chrome team planning on implementing HTML5 form input widget soon? So if you guys go to the developer resources, you'll find there a link which says web platform status, and we try to keep that up to date. It tells you for each one of the HTML5 APIs we're working on, where are we at with the implementation. Of course, you can also look at the Chromium discussion list and all that stuff. So this is in the works. There are actually examples out there that show different cases of different examples. And once that makes its way into a more stable release or beta release, we will have a lot of examples. They're coming.
So the sliders in the presentation were actually form input fields also. We didn't do anything special for the draggable sliders. Chrome's taking care of that for us. WebKit, actually, I think. And it's actually kind of funny because the sliders look native to each platform, that kind of thing. And we don't have support for every single input, but we're getting there, and they're pretty cool to play with, so worth checking out.
Yeah, go ahead.
But I'm curious about the multimedia streaming. Everything so far has been a progressive download.
Sure.
What's the support of HTML5 for streaming formats?
Sure. The question's about what about HTML5 support for streaming. As far as I know, I don't know actually. I just don't know. I haven't kept up with that. So. Okay.
So Tom plays streaming.
Yeah. So there you go. Awesome. I think we have one more from.
So I'll give you an unpopular question then.
Oh no.
Is it possible to provide some sort of DRM protection for video in HTML5?
Well. I don't know.
The question was, is it possible to write a DRM protection in HTML5 for video?
I mean, I would tell you that there are probably people here who would say it's impossible to write a DRM system in general, but
Yeah. I know it's unpopular. And I was just thinking in the previous app example, I mean, if we could just...
I agree with you. Like it's a desire that some people have. As far as I know, I don't have an answer for you regarding that. Yeah. So sorry.
Thank you. We have a few seconds left. One more question regarding local storage from user's perspective. How, if possible, could one view delete such application data? So there is an API to access, add, remove local storage. We are working on various specs and prototypes to give the user more power to see what's in the local database and local cache and delete stuff, revoke permissions. You saw in the thumbnail demo how they showed you what's in the local database. So something along those lines is in the works.
And just to add on to that, the Chrome developer tools give you great insight into what's going on there.
Thank you. Thank you. So gentleman over there mentioned use the Chrome developer tools. They give you great insight of what is in your local storage and local databases. Thank you, sir. With that, we'll have to wrap up. We're over time. We're going to be around. Come talk with us. Thank you.